Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maxi-Geek Show. Today is Friday, January 20th, and this is episode number 45. After the quiet week that we had just last week, this one turned out to be quite the opposite. We got news about games coming to new platforms, release dates for a few games, and hardware news from Apple. Once we get through the news, we'll take a quick look at the remaining 2023 previews for Sega, Square Enix, Take-Two, and Ubisoft, along with WB Games, and then finally the game set to release next week. Before we get into the news though, if you are watching live on Twitch, do be sure to give us a follow, and if you're watching the replay on YouTube, liking the video really does help us out. With that out of the way, the first story we're going to get to is the new trailer for The Mandalorian. So during the week, Disney and Lucasfilm teased that a new trailer for The Mandalorian Season 3 would be revealed, and that was the case. So the new trailer is here. I will not play the trailer, just to be sure that if anyone does not want to be spoiled, that it won't be spoiled for them, but I will put it in the chat there. So the new trailer, though, it's not a massive trailer. It's about 2 minutes in length, but it does highlight some of the the challenges in the story, and that Din and Grogu are going to be going on in this third season. What we can show is the new poster. So for every season of The Mandalorian, they've had a poster. The first season, it was basically just him walking in the desert because, the child then was a secret. The second season had him with Grogu. This one is more of an action pose. So it's a very, very cool pose. Has him in flight with Grogu in his arms. Very cool looking. But that's really all I'm going to show. So we know that this season is going to be 8 episodes in length, and it will start on March 1st. So once that is done on March 1st, there'll be a new episode every week. So we're looking towards the end of April. That means for a period of 3 weeks, so the week of March 1st, the following week, and then the week of March 16th, there will be 2 Star Wars shows running simultaneously because The Bad Batch is currently airing on Disney+. They've got their 4th episode up now, and there's still another 12 of those to go. So they're running through March 16 with a 2-part season final. So again, I'm not going to show the trailer because, want to make sure that people can enjoy it, should they choose to. And if they don't want to see it, we'll make sure that it is completely, hidden from them, from us. I'm excited to see it. I'll be honest though, I was really hoping that when, at the end of season 2, spoiler alert, Grogu goes off with Luke Skywalker, that Grogu was done for now. Like, his story would happen somewhere else. The whole, 2 episodes of The Mandalorian inside the Boba Fett show didn't make sense for a Boba Fett show. But the fact that the big thing was about, Grogu coming back, I don't like Grogu. I don't like the dynamic that they have. I wanted a more, gunslinger style show. And instead we're getting, one Mando and a baby. Doesn't really appeal to me that way. The action's cool, the stories are cool, characters are cool and all that, but I just don't like that dynamic. But that's me personally. Moving away from the future and space travel, we're going to go back in time and talk about the industrial age, specifically Anno 1800. So Anno 1800 has been on PC for a number of years now. They've been hosting a lot of content, posting a lot of content for the game over that time. Late last year, they did reveal that the series would be coming to console for the first time, and then earlier this week, a live stream was hosted by Ubisoft where they confirmed that Anno 1800 will arrive on Xbox Series X and S and PlayStation 5 on March 16. So this one, it's a full console port of the title. There's nothing cut from it or anything like that. It is the full experience. I will post the link for that one in the chat as well. So the big thing with this one is it's not SimCity. Right? You're not just throwing down a bunch of buildings, throwing a port down and calling it a day. You have to make sure that your city can function, that you can ship things out. So you have to take in all those different aspects. As you do venture out, you'll have to build new factories and buildings. You'll have to connect them. You can see all the power lines, the train tracks. You've got to go through all those different aspects that something like SimCity is known for. But this is set around the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So there's a lot of things like that. You can see there's a guy there on the penny farthing, the bicycle. There are two of them actually. So again, this is the first time that this series has ever come to consoles. It's been a PC exclusive series before. So that is very, very cool that it is on its way. We do know that there will be the standard, just game on its own, and there will be a deluxe edition of the game. The deluxe edition includes 3 cosmetic packs, which feature a bunch of new items. They are the Pedestrian Zone Pack, the Amusements Pack, and Vibrant Cities Pack. There is also an early adopter offer if you get the game before April 16, which is a month after it releases. That'll give you access to the Imperial and Console Founder Packs, as well as an art book and digital soundtrack. It's very, very cool that they're doing this. The thing that sort of worries me in terms of content, so everything that's sort of on the PC build, is all there, but the PC's had 3+ years of DLC essentially. They've not announced any of those plans yet for the console build, like they're going to be releasing them every 2 months or anything like that. There's none of that news. It could be that they're going to do more for it. It could be they're going to do nothing for it. We really don't know. But it is interesting to see them basically committing to bringing this series that's never been on console to console. Now, while Ubisoft have studios all over the world, which we'll get into a bit later, this is actually being ported by the studio that develops the Anno series. So the studio that actually makes Anno 1800 for PC is the studio doing this. So they haven't farmed it out to another Ubisoft studio or a third-party company to do this port, so it's all done in-house. Moving away from, the history channel of gaming, we're going to talk about the sci-fi channel of gaming, and that is that Remnant from the Ashes is coming to Switch. So Remnant from the Ashes is a single-player or up to 4-player cooperative action game where you're basically trying to survive in a world that has been overrun by demons and monsters. The game's been out for a number of years on PC. It released in August of 2018, somewhere around there. And it was done by Gunfire Games. Now, Gunfire Games are the same folks that were spun up after THQ collapsed years ago. They're the people that make the Darksiders games. So Darksiders 2, and Darksiders 3 was them. Darksiders, it's not 4. It's the isometric one. I can't think of what that one's called. That one was overseen by them, but it was developed by another company. So after Darksiders 3, the studio moved on to Remnant from the Ashes, and they just announced Remnant 2 last year at the Game Awards. So that series is doing pretty well for them. What is quite interesting, though, is that we have some more, interesting things to talk about, because this is another THQ game that is coming to Switch years after it's come to other platforms. They've done it with Saints Row, they did it with Destroy All Humans, they did it with Kingdoms of Amalur, Re-Reckoning, yep. So they've done it with countless games. This is just another example of that. Now, with this one, we don't have a release date for it. We don't know when it is coming. We just know that it is. It is coming at some point today, some point in 2023. However, beyond that, we don't know. With the Saints Row port they did, that was announced. It took them about 9 months to get it out. So it really just depends on how close they are, like how far along in development they are bringing it across. We do get a bunch of screens from the Switch build, or so they say. You can see, there's not a lot of texture work going on the ground. The grass is sort of just sticking there. There's nothing sort of looks like it's holding it in place. So I do believe this is, the Switch version. I've seen this screen many times from the PC build. It does look a lot smaller, so it is highly likely that it is, the Switch build. They do have them flagged as saying they're, Switch screenshots, but we'll wait and see till we see some real footage of how it runs in action. What is interesting, like the game is available now on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. So if you do want to play it, you can get it there today. When the game first launched, it did have a number of issues. They didn't. There was a few things that weren't that well put together, if you will. But the developers, they did a lot of work, a lot of fixes to fix all that stuff, and they released a bunch of content. A couple of expansions dropped for it as well. We don't know if those expansions are coming to the Switch version at launch, or if there'll be a later, release add-on. Given how they've done, most of the other Switch ports with everything included, I would maybe 75% say for certain that these will be included here. We just don't know yet. But it is nice to see them doing, more content for the Switch. I just wish they'd be doing more content, alongside the other platforms, not 2, 3, 4 years later. Moving away from the remnant from the ashes, though, and the worlds of horror, we're moving into the world of The Sims with new information about 2 new kits that are coming out. So there are 4 levels of expansionable items for The Sims. You've got your expansion packs, which are big content drops. Then you have your... I have it down in the list because I couldn't remember them. So your game packs, which is sort of things that add elements like, rooms and such. Stuff is literally stuff. And then kits are micro expansion, micro content drops, essentially. So coming this week... it's actually out today, now I think about it. The Sims 4 is getting 2 new kits. There's the Bathroom Clutter Kit and the Simtimates Apparel Kit. So instead of Intimate, it's Simtimates. The Bathroom Clutter Kit, its biggest thing that I've seen a lot of people be absolutely ecstatic for is the fact that you can put in different patterns of toilet paper, and you can even turn the toilet paper around. This is the correct way for toilet paper to go. Some people do it the other way because they're wrong. But you can do that with this new clutter pack. So it's not designed to completely drastically change the game or anything like that. It's just to make, the bathrooms in the homes that you can build be more, authentic, look like they're actually lived in by people. One of the big things that it adds is these plastic tubs, which my sister had one growing up for a while. I've, seen them in countless theaters. Behind backstage and all that, they put makeup and everything in them because they're generally cheap to get. They hold a fair bit, and they're generally pretty durable. But things like that, the loofah and the plunger, said all the accessories on the benches, they're all included in this. So you can see a bunch of things here going on with it. These are not required to buy. They're usually about $9 to buy them. So they are there if you want them. The Simtimates one, however, is more for... it's basically underwear, right? So they worked with a company called MeUndies to develop, looks and styles that reflect the Sims' personalities alongside, the visual aesthetic of the game. So you're not going to see, a super, risque content. So we've got some sort of stuff here. You can see... we've got just the generic boxer briefs. We've got sort of the one-piece suit. We've got the bra and panties. We've got just sort of the sleepwear set, if you will. But it's basically designed that your sim can now sort of show off their body type more than anything else. As I said, these are available today. They're available via the in-game store and via the EA marketplace. They should be out for all platforms. They definitely will be out for PC and Mac. They should be out for consoles, but consoles may be a day or two behind with that sort of thing because they generally are. Now, obviously, The Sims, they are working on the next version of The Sims. Currently just called The Sims 5. Sort of internally, we don't know if it's going to get a proper name or if it will just be called that. But that is something that, they're working on. And things like this will be included sort of out of the gate with a lot of that stuff. Also, if you're not aware, The Sims is now free to start on all the platforms. So if you do have, PC, PlayStation, or Xbox, you can jump on, grab the game for free. The base game is there. It's not restricted. You don't get like one room in a house or create a sim experience. None of that. It's the full Sims experience. But if you want to get the Simtimates apparel or you want the Galaxy's Edge Star Wars expansion, you've got to buy those separately. Which has always been the way, but this game is now coming up on 5 or 6 years of age. So you now no longer have to buy the base game to start. You can just get the game for free, which I think is very, very cool. Moving into the world of comics, we're talking about Marvel's Midnight Suns next. Specifically, we're bringing up the fact that we got news today about the first expansion as part of the season pass that will add Deadpool to the mix. So I will play the trailer while I talk about this one. So this particular content drop will happen on January 26th, which is next week. With this one, it will add in Deadpool, as you would expect it to, along with 10 new cards that he can make use of. new cosmetic items for the Abbey. I couldn't think what the word was for a second. So the Abbey is where all the heroes hang out when they're not on missions. And then new outfits for Wade to wear, including, at the end of the trailer, they give a reason as to why, he doesn't take his mask off, and it's quite funny. So I'll pop that link in the chat as well. Now, there are obviously 3 more season pass characters to appear: Venom, Morbius, and Storm. At the moment, they're not saying there's no way of buying like just the Deadpool content on its own. It is tied to the season pass. If you don't own the game and you want to get everything, today, for example, you can buy the deluxe edition, which gives you the base game and the season pass at a discounted rate. But it's not necessarily, you don't have to buy the season pass today. So that is there. If you do buy it, though, you do get a whole bunch of extra information, extra outfits, I should say. So, Captain America has his future suit, his Captain of the Guard suit, which is basically a knight. Captain Marvel has a few magic, so they've all got extra suits, and they're designed specifically to look like they do in, the comics. So it's more, not interpreted like some of the looks are for the game, but it's more like this is a comic accurate style thing that doesn't really fit normally, but for fun you can do so. At the moment, we don't know when the other 3 characters are expected to drop. Given that the game released at the start of December and we're at the end, coming to the end of January, we're getting the first DLC character. If you go on a 2-month cycle, we should see somebody at the end of March, early April, and then so on and so forth, but that's all speculation. Now we're going to move into some release date information. So during the week, we got the formal reveal of a game, the release date of a game we knew was coming, and then the release information for a game that's been in development for a long time. First, however, we're going to talk about the game we got word of last year at the Game Awards, and that is Returnal for PC. So Returnal for PC was announced at the Game Awards, as I said, but it wasn't given a specific date then. Right? We just knew it was coming in early 2023. Today, we got the release date that it is coming on February 15th. The port we also learnt today is being done by Climax Studios. Climax Studios they've been doing this stuff since 1988. They've been around for a while, but they gained critical acclaim and attention for being the first studio outside of Konami to ever make Silent Hill games. They also were the developers behind the Assassin's Creed Chronicles series, so the China, India, and Russia games. They also have done a bunch of licensed stuff lately, How to Train Your Dragons, things like that. So they've been doing a lot of things. So these are the guys bringing this PlayStation 5 game to PC. As part of the confirmation of it, we got another PC features trailer. I really shouldn't have to play it because it's the standard stuff. It supports ultra widescreen, it supports the PlayStation 5 controller, it supports real-time ray tracing, all the bits and pieces that you would expect. This game has them all. Obviously, this game is very, very, very chaotic. So a lot of optimization's been done across the various hardware configurations that people have, so AMD cards and NVIDIA cards. One of the things that they've included is what they call NVIDIA NIS. So basically, if you don't have the latest, graphics card, the inclusion of NVIDIA NIS will actually help you out still by helping add information to the game to give you, better visuals and better performance while using the hardware that you have on hand. So as you can see on the trailer, you can use the DualSense controller if you have one and you want to use it on PC. If you don't have the controller, you can use just the standard, Xbox controller or generic Windows compatible gaming controller. All the features that they've added to the title since it was released, so the ability to save mid-run, which is something you couldn't do at launch, those are being included here as well. So it's getting sort of everything that's been released since the game launched, plus, a few extra bells and whistles because of, the PC hardware available. The full PC specs are on the PlayStation blog. I will link the story here so you can grab that link if you so need it. All the stories will, of course, be in the description on the YouTube video. We did review the game on PS5 when it launched. Terrence was the one who did that. He loved it. He thought it was amazing. it is not for the faint of heart. The game will challenge you, and it will probably destroy you if you're not, up with what it requires from you. It's a very, very demanding game. But if you put the time in, if you put the effort in to make sure, that you're learning how it plays, every time you die, you'll come back a little bit better, a little bit stronger, because it is a roguelike title. Moving away from, space shooters, we're going to talk about a space shooter called Endless Dungeon. So Endless Dungeon, this is a game that's been in development for a number of years. It's part of the Endless series, but it's not a direct connection to any of those other games. They've been saying for a while it's coming. We finally learned today that it will be coming to Xbox, PC, and PlayStation on May 16th. I'm going to say the 15th. May 18th, sorry. The game is also coming to Switch, but the Switch version was not dated today, which is the typical thing for Switch owners. They tend to get given the bit of, the shaft. They either get games, years later, or games announced for everything, including Switch, but the Switch version is, released on its own later on. So Hogwarts Legacy is one of those games. It's coming out next month for, the new gen platforms and PC. April gets the old Xbox and PlayStation generations, and then switches in July. So that's the way Switch owners are being treated lately, and that's not anything against them. It's more about the developers not being able to manage what they're working on. Little rant over. Endless Dungeon is coming out on May 18th. It is a cooperative roguelike tactical tower defense twin stick shooter. I think I covered everything in there. Yeah. So it is a top-down isometric shooter game. So twin stick shooter. But there's a slight element of tower defense because basically on every level when you're playing it, there is a crystal. You have to defend the crystal at all costs. If the crystal breaks, which you can see here, the little yellow thing, you die. All right. There are these life forms around you that will attempt to come from all sides. You can see here in this little trailer that you're setting everything up. If they break the crystal, you die. If your comrade gets taken down, you don't chase after them and bring them back. They may die and not be able to come back, right? So there's a lot of tactical decision making required, especially when you're playing on your own, about setting things up. So you can see here how it all plays out. We actually get some gameplay now. So if the crystal, as I said, destroys, you get reset essentially. So you then get to try again, maybe taking some information that you failed to use properly in the previous run, take that back into consideration. It is quite funny that this is also a roguelike, a space shooter, very much like Returnal, just a very, very different take on the genre. So the fact that we finally have a release date for it is great news, because again, it was one of those things where they kept saying for ages, it's coming, but we never got anything for it. So to have a release date now is great. As you can see here on the trailer, it does say Switch, but there's no date for that. If you do want to go for the physical release of the game, it will come in the Day 1 edition, which comes with some cards, an art book, and a bunch of digital content. The digital deluxe comes with a bunch of digital content. PC players get a few extra items over console players in the digital form, because of Steam. But that's pretty much all it is. We're just excited that we actually have a release date for this game. The final game that we got a release date for is a game that we learnt was coming about 18 months ago. And then after the announcement, they basically went radio silent until early last year when they announced it was going to get delayed an entire 12 months. And then late last year, they released a teaser to say, hey, we've got more to share in the new year. And share they did today, because we actually have a release date for EA Sports PGA Tour. So this is the proper name for it. The full name for the new golf game from Electronic Arts is EA Sports PGA Tour. So it's very much like the EA Sports FC, which is the name that they're giving the FIFA games they used to make. That deal's gone, so they're calling their soccer games EA Sports FC. So the golf games are EA Sports PGA Tour. Wouldn't surprise me if we see something similar happening with Madden and other sporting titles. Maybe not. We'll see what happens there. But this game will hit PC, Xbox Series X and S, and PlayStation 5 on March 24. So they're about 2 months away from release. Alongside the news, of the release date, the game has a digital deluxe edition as well as the standard edition of the game. If you go the digital deluxe version, it does come with 3 days early access to the game, and you also get early access to the Augusta National, tournament. So the big thing with this, I do actually have an in-depth preview for it. I will link the story here for the release date and the gameplay trailer, and then I'll link the preview here as well for it. That's a bit weird. Let me get rid of that. There we go. So the preview, go into more detail about what Pure Strike is, and they're showing off some of the stuff they've done here with the actual players. So each player, hits the ball differently. So Pure Strike is basically that white line. You said the way that a player brings the club type back, you will need to match that as accurately as you can. If you're pretty close to it, the line will be a big thick white line. If you're way off, you'll have a red line. You can see probably just behind his shoulder there's a little white notch to indicate the stopping point. That's when you need to push back on the stick to push forward on the club, and really drive it home. One of the big things they've added to this game, apart from this, is a thing called shot types. And the shot type is where you can add on enhancements, right? So on the screen there, you can see one's the one that is equipped as power drive. Here you go, shot types. So with the shot type, what it does is it adds extra oomph, or think of it as a buff for your stick. So a long flop will add, it'll give you more height on your flop. Hack is if you really need to get out of the rough, that'll give you more power to do so. It doesn't impact your swing, it doesn't impact the club, it impacts the shot itself. There's one called the pick, which will give you a little bit more roll on the green, right? If you have that pick shot type selected when you're at the start of the hole, when you're going for the drive, that's not going to help you. It won't hurt you, but it won't help you. So that's something to look for that. They're going into all the details here, so I won't have that play anytime soon. But the big thing is that the grass on the courses they've included has been replicated in the game. So the ball behavior is, if you're on the Augusta National course and the ball's rolling on the fairway in the game, the ball should roll the same way in real life, because they have the elevation, they have the speed of the incline, the angle of the incline, the grass type, how thick the grass is. If it's a softer grass but it's a thicker grass, that will impact how everything plays in the game, same as it does in real life. So that's sort of what they're really going for, is trying to make it as accurate to the real world experience as they can, just in a digital form. Hey Steve, yes, golf games are getting wildly accurate. So the big thing with the courses is there will be 30 courses at launch. So what that means is that if you're looking for plenty of courses to play on, they have you covered there. So across the 30 courses, there are some from the US, some from Canada, obviously St. Andrews, the original course from Scotland. There's a couple of New Zealand courses in there as well. So there's a lot to look forward to there. Now, if you're somebody who likes to create your own golfer, so you can get in and just, this is me, I'm playing golf here, the game will also offer you a full sort of RPG experience for your creator golfer. You can take them, or you can take any of the pros from the PGA or the LPGA and play with them, but you can take your character, jump into the very bottom ranked tournament and basically make your way up the ladders, up the tournaments as if you were starting out. Or you can jump in straight to the highest ranked tournament and hope for the best. There are also challenges that you can undertake that will change weekly, like, get to the end of 3 holes with 2 shots per hole, right? Stuff like that. So those options are there. There's also the tournaments, so you can register for a tournament, and then basically you get 1 shot to play at the holes in the tournament. Then your score at the end of it gets uploaded to the leaderboard. The highest ranked players win, and then you're given back in-game currency that you can use to buy new hats and clothes, Under Armour branded jumpers and hats, or Nike golf bags, stuff like that. The whole creator-player, though, every action, everything you do, so whether you're playing a random game, you're playing challenges, you're playing a tournament, you're playing in a career, every action you do will give you XP. As you earn XP, you'll level up, and every time you level up, you get skill points. And you can associate those skill points with any aspect of your character you prefer. So if you really want to be able to drive off the tee, you can do that if you put the skill points into that aspect. If you know your short game is a bit of an atrocious thing and you need more control when putting, you can put more into those aspects there to really give you more flexibility. What it means is that no two characters would be the same, because somebody may prioritize ball control over power, or the short game over the long game. Beyond all that, though, there's also the blueprint system for the gear. So you might buy yourself the latest Callaway Golf driver, but then you can tweak some aspects of it to make it exclusively yours. In the preview, I do go into a lot more detail. I did get to sit down with some of the game's designers and producers for it, and they went through a lot of stuff, so it is definitely worth checking out. I did ask them about the fact that in past EA Sports golf games, there's been mini games like we had on the Wii for a number of years. We had disc golf. There doesn't appear to be anything like that at launch. They're pointed more to the challenges being the fun things to do, but I don't think that's actually what it should be. But what do I know? That, of course, does bring us to the end of the news. So we're now going to dive into the remaining 2023 previews. There are a few that we're going to get to for the week. Unlike last time, we're not going to talk about every single studio or whatever in the list, because there are 5 to go through, and some of them, looking at Ubisoft, are quite big. Take-Two is also massive, but we'll get to that in a moment. So yeah, we'll just sort of speed through them, talk about things we know are coming, and proceed from there. The first studio we're going to take a look at is Sega, or Sega, however you want to pronounce it. We actually got a bit of information today for a couple of Sega titles, and again, one of them was that Endless Dungeon has a release date. So looking through it, the Sega Group is divided up into 3 branches. We have Sega Group Japan, which is basically the Japanese development arms. We have Atlas, Persona and all that sort of stuff. And then we have Sega Europe. That's where Amplitude Studios, the 2 Point Campus guys are. They're all over in Sega Europe. So Sega Group is divvied up into 3 main business units. CS1 R&D/Asia and Japan Studio Division 1 is a horrible name for a group, but this is where the Ryogoku Studios live. So these are the folks that make the Like a Dragon series, which was formerly known as Yakuza. They rebranded everything last year to be given the more accurate Japanese title, Like a Dragon. The first game for them will be launching next month, and that is Like a Dragon Ishin. So that is coming from them. They're also the guys that oversaw the Monkey Ball games recently, so there's been a while for that. We might see something from them for this year. But there's actually 2 Like a Dragon titles coming in 2023. This one, and then Like a Dragon, The Man Who Erased His Name. So it's a really weird title, but that's coming later in the year at this point. Division 2, they primarily work on the Sonic games. That's their big thing. So Sonic Team are in that group. They just shipped Sonic Frontiers last year, so apart from DLC for that, shouldn't hear much from them. The Olympic Games titles are also developed here, so the Mario and Sonic at whatever Olympic they happen to be at. Given that they tend to release the video game, the Mario and Sonic title. Yes, the full title is actually Like a Dragon Gaiden: The Man Who Erased His Name. So yeah, it's a very James Bond title. So as I was saying, the Mario and Sonic games, they generally release one of those games a year before the Olympics, and given that the Paris Olympics take place in 2024, we might see the release of the Mario and Sonic at Paris coming in, say, September or October. Obviously, that's not announced yet. We just have to wait and see. The Sapporo Studio and Division 3 work on the Phantasy Star series. Nothing really fancy there. Division 4, they primarily work on Japan-only titles or Asia-only titles, so we tend not to see much from them externally. In terms of Atlas, they have 3 teams, 3 groups within Atlas. The first team is known as Team Maniacs. They're the folks that do the Shin Megami Tensei titles. So they shipped Shin Megami Tensei 5 a couple of years ago on Switch. And they're also the folks that oversaw the release of Soul Hackers 2 last year. They tend to do like a game a year, so we might see something from them this year, but at this stage we don't know if that's going to be the case or not. Creative Department Second Production is also known as P Studio. This is where the Persona series is developed. Obviously, yesterday, or today, depending on what part of the world you live in, we got the release of the Persona 3 Portable and Persona 4 Golden, modern ports. They were launched today. With those out of the way, the team now have no titles currently publicly known. They tend to do a new Persona game every 5 years or so in Japan. 5 or 6 years. 2018 was when Persona 5 first released in Japan. It was released in 2019 in the West. And then obviously they do we got Persona 5 Royal, and then they started working on all the updates for Persona 3, Persona 4, and then Persona 5 for Switch and Xbox. So they may have a new game this year. They tend to be quite silent though. They tend not to do anything publicly until they're ready. So it might be one of those surprising, announcement ones. The third group is known as Studio Zero. This is where Catherine was ported. They've also done a bunch of other work for Atlas as a whole. We know that they're currently working on a game called Project Re-Fantasy, but that was announced back in 2019. It's sort of been silent since then. We know that they're still working on it. It's been announced, it's been confirmed publicly that that's still in development, but we don't know anything about it other than that. As I said, Sega Europe is where, Creative Assembly, Amplitude Studios are. So Amplitude Studios, they're working on Humankind for console, sort of, and then Endless Dungeons, which we just got a release date. So in 2021, Amplitude Studios released Humankind for PC and Mac, which was their take on the, not the Civilization formula, but like a 4X strategy game, around sort of, growing up your peoples. That was due to arrive on consoles in 2022, specifically Xbox and PlayStation. But then in November of last year, they announced that the development on those games has been delayed indefinitely, and anyone who pre-ordered the game had the pre-order cancelled and the money returned. They've just said that they came across unique porting challenges for it, and as such, they weren't able to bring the titles to console at this stage. They've not cancelled the development, but they're not promoting it at the moment until they get this sorted out. Interestingly, again, like Amplitude Studios, they know consoles because they do them, but this is their first time doing this sort of title. What is interesting is Sega owned Relic Entertainment, and Relic Entertainment did Age of Empires 4, which is also coming to console later this year. So if they're doing that, then they could help out these guys, but we just have to wait and see. Creative Assembly has three known studios, sorry. The main office is in Horsham, not Horsham here in Victoria, but Horsham in the UK. They're the folks that are doing, the Total War Warhammer 3 last year. Alien Isolation was done by them. And then last year in May, they announced Hyenas, which also just got new information today. The story for that will be up soon after the show. This is a fast-paced shooter, which is not a genre that these guys have done before. They did a shooter, and I'll put that in quotes, for Alien Isolation, but that was definitely not fast-paced. The game did have a few alphas last year, but they were never made available to us here in Australia. So they're still working on it, still promoting it. We'll see what happens with that this year. The Sophia team is working on... They did the Total War Troy title a couple of years ago. But they've also announced a new game. So last year, Creative Assembly shipped Total War Warhammer 3 and then announced Hyenas, a new title from that same studio, and then a third new title from the Sophia studio. We don't know what it is. We know it's an action game, but that's it. So the Creative Assembly group has 3 games in the works at the moment, plus supporting their Total War games. So they're very, very busy folks. Hardlight, they do mobile games. As I said, Relic Entertainment, they did Age of Empires 4 for Xbox, a couple of years ago. They're shipping next month. We will see the release of Company Heroes 3 for PC. And again, these guys did Age of Empires 4, and that is coming to Xbox. So there's a chance that if they're doing it internally, that may explain why Company of Heroes 3 got announced for consoles last year. They may have sort of, came up with a great control solution, realized it worked for both Age of Empires and Company of Heroes. So again, if they've got this nailed down, that may help out Amplitude with Humankind. Sports Interactive, not the greatest name for a studio, but they work on the Football Manager series. The same game was released under 3 different titles last year. So it was Football Manager 2024 for Xbox and PlayStation when it eventually hits PlayStation 5. Football Manager 2020 Mobile was for iOS and Android. And then Football Manager Touched was for Switch and Apple Arcade. So weird names, but there you go. 2 Point Studios is their last group, and they focus specifically on their own games. 2 Point Campus being the one that released last year, and got a bunch of content already. But 2 Point Hospital, they supported that for about 4 years, so we should see more from them in 2023. Moving off of Sega and onto Square Enix, it's actually going to be a fairly big year for these guys. So we know Square Enix has a couple of Final Fantasy games releasing this year, but there's also more we're expecting to hear about. Much like Sega and Capcom, they don't have the best, the most original names for their internal teams. Square Enix themselves shipped some 22 titles last year, but they do a mix of in-house development and external development. Bandai Namco, who don't get one of these lists, is because they primarily do external development. They have, I think, 2 internal teams, but then they hire out, they farm out work to other studios to have them make games. So Square Enix is sort of like 70% internal, 30% external. Creative Business Unit 1, that's where the Final Fantasy series lives. Kingdom Hearts is there as well. We know these guys are working on the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, part 2 of the remake of Final Fantasy VII. That got announced last year. They also announced last year Kingdom Hearts 4. No word on that when that's coming out. It's probably going to be a while. Square Enix does need to slow down on the games. They did ship a lot. They're also the guys that oversee the Theatre Rhythm titles, so the musical games. There's one of those launching next month in Theatre Rhythm Final Bar Line, which is just another entry in that series. And they also, as I said, last year they oversaw the release of the Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core remake. So these guys have been fairly busy, not likely to slow down if Rebirth is still aiming to release later this year. That Rebirth is also a PS5 only game at this point. We'll see what happens with that. Creative Business Unit 2, again, these are some original titles. They look after the Dragon Quest series, the Nier series, and the Bravely/Octopath series. This group didn't really do a lot last year. We got the Nier Automata port for Switch, but that was done by Platinum. They did release Triangle Strategy, so that was them as well. But that wasn't primarily developed internally. An external studio did help them with that one. We are expecting to see some more information on Dragon Quest this year. We did get Dragon Quest Treasures at the end of last year. That released as a Switch exclusive. It released as a spin-off from Dragon Quest XI Echoes of an Elusive Age S. So the sort of the retooled version of that. And then late last year, they also announced that Dragon Quest: The Adventures of Dai Infinity Strash is coming to consoles outside of Japan. It was announced for Japan a while ago, but this was the first Western confirmation for it. This year could be a massive year for Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest XII has been confirmed to be in development for a while. We should hear more on it in May. The chances of it releasing this year are very, very slim, but it's possible. As a Dragon Quest: The Adventures of Dai Infinity Strash should be releasing in 2023. And then Dragon Quest III HD 2D, the remake, that has been in development for about 2 years now, so that is definitely due for a release. So we could get 2, maybe 3 games this year for Dragon Quest. It could be a very, very busy year for them. Generally speaking, though, we also have in May Dragon Quest Day. It's usually when they sort of do releases, and they celebrate that day by announcing, new mobile games, new merchandise, all that sort of stuff. So any sort of information on that series should happen then. But this unit also has a game coming out next month in the form of Octopath Traveler 2. Whereas the first one just released on Switch initially and then started coming to other platforms. This one is launching on a bunch on day one, so that'll be very big for them. Creative Business Unit 3. These guys overlook the Dragon Quest Builders series. So these guys, while Business Unit 2 do the main Dragon Quest, these guys do the Builders sub-series, and only the Builders sub-series. It's been 5 years now since the last Dragon Quest Builders title released. It's had, ports to PC, it's had ports to Xbox, ports to mobile since then, but we haven't had a new one for a while, so we could see something from that this year. Final Fantasy 11 and 14 are also operated out from this group, so the MMOs. And the Final Fantasy 14 team, or the Final Fantasy 14 production group, are also the people developing Final Fantasy 16. So even though there's a Final Fantasy team in Business Unit 1, they're not doing Final Fantasy 16, that's these guys. So they're sort of mixing everything around here at the moment. But with that said, that's dated for June 22nd, so we should see more on that as we get closer to the release. The MMOs, they'll keep getting content. We literally just got a big patch the other day for it, added a whole bunch of new stuff, and they've already confirmed there's more coming. Busy year for them. Business Unit 4, they primarily do mobile games, so the Mana series for mobile, Final Fantasy, Brave, Exodus, and things like that. They're going to keep at it. The Pixel remasters they did for, mobile and PC, this was these guys. They're now coming to PlayStation and Switch. We may see these guys involved with that. It could be somebody else, we don't know. Tokyo RPG Factory, they've done 3 titles since they formed. I Am Setsuna, Lost Sphere, and Oninaki. The last game they released, though, was Oninaki back in 2019. So it's been a while since they've released a game on their own. They do support other studios, but we'll have to wait and see. Luminous Productions, they were spun up to create Forspoken. Having been delayed, a half a dozen times, that's finally releasing next week. There's still a chance it could get delayed, but it's unlikely. Square Enix London Mobile, they shipped the Tomb Raider Reloaded game in 2022, but now that the IP for Tomb Raider's back is no longer owned by Square Enix, we might not see what they're doing for that. We do know they're supporting a company called Navigator Games on working on an Avatar The Last Airbender mobile game. I had to specify Avatar The Last Airbender, because if I just said Avatar mobile game, somebody may have thought I meant the movie series from James Cameron. And then Taito Corporation, they're just releasing a bunch of their, their classic sort of titles. They're using like indie games from Germany to sort of bring them back to modern audiences. So that's what's going on with Square Enix. Now, this is the one that I need to sort of preface for. Take-Two Interactive have a number of development studios, but a lot of the stuff that they've got in the works is not known publicly. There's some stuff that's public, some stuff that became public because it got leaked, but a lot of the stuff is just generally, unknown at this stage. So if we go through this, Take-Two have 2K. So everyone just thinks 2K is the parent company of everything, but they're not. They're actually a division of Take-Two Interactive. But Take-Two Interactive have 2K, Private Division, Rockstar Games, and now Zynga, the mobile group, is done by them. So they bought out Zynga last year, and then like a few days later, that was like $12.5 billion US. It was the biggest game purchase at a company purchase from a game studio at the time. And then a few days later, Xbox went, hold my beer and bought Activision for $69 billion. So starting off with 2K, 31st Union are the folks that do the Mafia titles. They oversee all things Mafia. They've confirmed they're working on a new Mafia. We know that the San Francisco, which is the main office for the group, is working on that, along with... sorry, not 31st Union. Sorry. Hangar 13 is who I'm thinking of there. 31st Union is the new studio that started up by Michael Condrey. He was the director for Dead Space and James Bond Everything or Nothing, and he also directed the Sledgehammer Games Call of Duty titles before he left there to start up this studio. They do have a sister studio in Spain, so there's a San Francisco group and a Spain group. We don't know what they're working on yet. They've not announced it, but the studio's been going on now this is their 3rd year in full operation, so they should probably be announcing something quite soon. Cat Daddy Games is a studio you probably don't know by name, but they make the mobile versions of the sports titles. So NBA Mobile, WWE Supercard, all that sort of stuff is done by these guys. They just released Season 5 for their mobile NBA title last year. Unlikely to see them do anything other than that. Cloud Chamber has 2 studios, which is quite interesting because they're a few years old, and they're currently working on the next BioShock game. We don't have any other details beyond that's what they're working on because they've not announced anything other than that. But again, that studio is coming in on its 3rd full year of operation, so we probably should hear something from them soon. Firaxis Games is the big one, because they just shipped Marvel Midnight Suns last year. And then they just announced the release date for Deadpool DLC just this morning. They also announced last year and started releasing more DLC for Civilization 6. This is the 3rd wave of DLC for the title. After the initial expansions, they did a pass. They've now done this new pass for it as well. It could be that this is sort of just adding in new features, new characters, and some of them are tweaks. Could be all that sort of stuff to prep for the new game. Civilization 6 is now like 7 years old, but we have to wait and see on that one. There was also a Civilization game released for mobile last year, launched in Korea first, and then rolled out to a few other Asian countries. But that was done by Nexon, not these guys. Hangar 13, here we go. These are the Mafia guys. So Hangar 13, not 31st Studios. So Hangar 13, the last game they released was the Mafia 1 remake, Mafia Definitive Edition. They were rumored to be working on another game in the UK studio that they have, but which is cancelled. And then since then they've confirmed they're working on Mafia 4. There are rumors saying that it will be a new modern day Mafia. The first one was in like the teens and 20s. Mafia 3 was in the 60s. So we could see something like the 80s or 90s for this one. There's also rumors that it'll be a prequel to the original Mafia game. So, we have to wait and see on all that sort of stuff. We know that studio founder Hayden Blackman left Hangar 13 last year. He's doing something else now. He was the guy who directed the Force Unleashed games for LucasArts back in the day. So he knows a thing or two about games. So hopefully he's staying in the industry because he has some really good titles to his name. The Hangar 13 Prague and Brno studios are the ones that focused on the remake more than anything. The Brno studio is actually where Mafia originally started, back when they were 2K Czech, and before then they were Illusion Studios. Interestingly, there's also a rumor that Hangar 13 are developing a new Topspin game, so a new tennis title. And Topspin 3, which released back in 2011, was done by what was then 2K Czech, which is now Hangar 13 Brno. So it's possible that these guys are working on that if that rumor turns out to be true, but there's nothing publicly confirmed for it. Hangar 13 Brighton, that's the studio that was working on what was potentially called Vault. There's been nothing on what they're doing now, probably just supporting Mafia development for the Hangar 13 group. HB Studios, they released PGA Tour 2K23 last year, been releasing a bunch of content for it. They just announced Season 2 the other day, so don't expect any more from them for that one. Visual Concept have 9 studios. Technically it's 8 studios and then a QA group, but they have them in Austin, Texas, Parksville, Canada, Shanghai, China, Seoul, Korea, Los Angeles in America, USA County, which is sort of somewhere near Los Angeles in the USA, Budapest in Hungary, and then San Jose in California in the USA. Excuse me. So they're actively working on both the NBA series and the WWE series, as well as seasons for those games. They've released an NBA game every year for the past, like 2 decades. Unlikely to change anytime soon. WWE got a title last year, having had a year off to reboot. There's no word if they're doing another game this year, if they're going to take another year off, make that a semi-annual series like the PGA game has been. We'll just have to wait and see. The 2K Vegas, Chengdu, and Madrid groups are all QA studios for 2K. They don't make games, so moving on from there. Ghost Story Games, they were formerly Irrational Games, where BioShock was created. In 2017, Ken Levine basically downsized the studio to be That's what I'm thinking too, Steve. For the WWE 2K24 to exist, there would have to be a lot of contract negotiations and, dealing with a whole bunch of stuff that is probably not worth the hassle. But I also don't think it's worth doing that game every year, because there's no change to the content every year. So every year, year after year after year, there'd be no change to justify it. So I think they're probably going to skip it, but we'll wait and see. Ghost Story Games, as I was saying though, they were the former Bioshock team. They've been sitting on their first game for a number of years. That was announced at the Game Awards last year, and that is Judas. Basically, it's Bioshock in space. There's nothing else you can say about it. It's just that. There might be more to it, but at the moment we don't know anything beyond the reveal trailer, which just makes it look like Bioshock in space. The Private Division group have three main arms: Private Division Publishing, Intercept Games, and Roll7. Roll7 released 2 games last year, Ollie Ollie World and Rollerdrome. Ollie Ollie World also got 2 expansions, so those guys are probably taking a breather, having had 2 big games and 2 expansions drop. Intercept Games are going to be busy because they're expected to release the Kerbal Space Program 2 into early access in next month. Who knows when that'll actually release it fully, but that's finally coming to early access. It's been a number of years since they first said it was going to happen. The Private Division Publishing arm, again, they don't make games, but they oversee the distribution of a bunch of titles. Last year they announced deals with the Bloober team, who are doing the Silent Hill 2 remake for Konami, Yellow Brick Games, Evening Star, and Die Gut Fabrik to bring their games to consoles this year. They also announced last year they're working with Weta Studios to bring an all-new Middle-earth game to players in 2024. So that's them. As I said, Rockstar Games is quite different because they have a bunch of locations around the world, but they all tend to basically work on 1 or 2 things at a time. So the active development is Grand Theft Auto 6, or whatever it ends up being called, and then GTA Online. That's what we know publicly, what they're working on. They are still doing small things for Red Dead Online, just not as much as they used to. They scaled development back for that in 2021. But they have a studio in Dundee, they have a studio in India, Leeds, Lincoln, London, New England, North, which is the original studio, used to be DMA Design back in the day, San Diego, which is where Red Dead Redemption 2 was led from, and Toronto. They're all just working on the same things. They're either doing content for GTA Online or they're working on Grand Theft Auto 6. That's pretty much it. The T2 Mobile Games group, this is not Zynga. They have Nordeus and Social Point. Nordeus does Top 11 Football Manager. It's a mobile manager game for soccer, much like Football Manager is from Sega. This is just another version of that. And Social Point do the series for League of Dragons and Champion Destiny. Playdots is in here, but in October of last year, Take-Two shut them down. The Zynga group, the only one that I'm going to mention here is Boss Alien. They did a bunch of racing games for a number of years, but they're actually the folks behind the Star Wars Hunters game that was supposed to release last year, then at the end of last year, and then earlier this year, and now it's still not dated. But this is the free-to-play MOBA game for mobile phones and Switch. And that's supposed to be coming out sometime soon. It will be free to play as it's done by Zynga, and that's all they ever do. It looks like a heck of a lot of fun, but until it actually gets released properly, we have to wait and see. They did do a small soft launch last year for mobile to get some, real player feedback. We don't know what the results of that were, and we don't know the shape of the game since then. They haven't publicly announced any further information, so we just have to wait and see. But those guys are doing Zynga games. They did Torchlight 3. That was done by Extra Games, which is now owned by Zynga. Natural Motion, they're the folks that are helping develop Star Wars Hunters, but Natural Motion is also a game engine. So Star Wars The Force Unleashed was built on that engine, so you could throw stormtroopers around with like ragdolls. That was them, and a whole bunch more was all sort of done with that tech. They've got a bunch of things in there. The problem is a lot of the developers just make generic games. So there's a developer in the Zynga group called Rolik, and I'm not kidding, one of the games they released is called Marble ASMR. That's it. That's the name of that. If that's going to be, a studio to pay attention to, it's not going to happen anytime soon because they just keep making the same generic mobile games. Moving away from Take-Two Interactive, we're going to speed through Ubisoft because Ubisoft have, well, honestly, they could have had a lot, and then Ubisoft themselves went and cancelled a bunch of games. So last year, in 2022, Ubisoft announced the cancellation of 4 titles that they were being worked on in the studios, but we didn't know what they were. They were unannounced games, but they cancelled them for whatever reason. Just a few days before I published this, feature, Ubisoft again cancelled 3 more unannounced games. So in the space of like 8 months, they cancelled 7 titles that were not publicly known. Now, of course, those things will eventually leak because they always do. Somebody will leave the studio because they got, the fact their game was cancelled. So they'll tell some reporter that this is what they were working on. Ubisoft themselves have a very interesting work model. They have maybe a half a dozen lead studios that work on the big things, and then they're supported by a network of studios. And when I say network, I mean a literal network. They have, some 30 plus studios around the world. So we're going to speed through it. So Ubisoft Abu Dhabi, they shipped Clash of Beasts last year, which is a mobile game. That looks pretty interesting if you're a mobile game player. I'd definitely say check that one out. Ubisoft Annecy, they're the folks doing Riders Republic, so they're working on content for that still, along with other support studios helping them. Ubisoft Barcelona, the last sort of thing they did was the Assassin's Creed 3 remaster that came to Switch and other platforms. Since then, they've basically been working on content for Rainbow Six Siege. This is one of the studios that's been noted to be working on a AAA unannounced game. But with the cancellation of a bunch of them, we don't know if this studio is still working on whatever that was. The Barcelona mobile studio, they're doing Hungry Dragon, which is it's a dragon version of Hungry Shark, which is also a Ubisoft game. We don't know if that's still happening. We don't know what they're working on for it. They keep updating it all the time. Belgrade is basically a support studio for the Ghost Recon series. They're also where the Ubisoft titles for Stadia were being ported. So all the titles from Ubisoft that went to Stadia, the Belgrade studio was the ones porting that across. The problem is we don't know what they're doing now with Stadia shutting down a couple of days ago. Berlin is a co-dev studio, so they basically just support other studios with whatever games they're working on. They were active in the development of Far Cry 6 a couple of years ago. They're also one of the studios attached to Skull and Bones, which has also again been delayed for the umpteenth time. These were the folks that were rumored to be doing the Anno 1800 console port. That is not the case. That is another studio, but they also help out with that series as well. Bordeaux, they're the folks that did the DLC for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Skull and Bones is a myth. So they did the DLC for Valhalla for Assassin's Creed. They're also now the lead studio on Assassin's Creed Mirage, which is supposed to be a much smaller scale multiplayer. Sorry, a much smaller scale Assassin's Creed title. Eking back to say Assassin's Creed 1 and 2. They're also doing the mobile battle royale title Wild Arena Survivors in the studio. They have some 400 plus staff in there, so they're quite a big studio. They actually have 2 locations, one either side of a main road, and they're building a new studio to bring them all together into one for next year. Bucharest is where the Hawk series was done. They did a bunch of content for the Tom Clancy Ghost Recon games as well. In 2021, they announced Frontline, which is the free-to-play multiplayer Ghost Recon game. That game looked bad at launch. When it was announced, people said, no, this is not good, try again. They did an alpha test at the end of a closed beta in 2020. Somebody leaked the footage from it because that's what always happens. People said, hey, this thing looks even worse, what the hell are you doing? Ubisoft decided in July of last year to cancel that game entirely. So we went from an announced game to an alpha that didn't go ahead, to a beta that went ahead, to a cancelled game. So there you go. The Bordeaux studio, as I said before, doing Mirage has some 400 plus people. Bucharest is the largest European outlet with over 800 staff on site. They are doing support for The Division, so they're still in the Tom Clancy world. But because they support the division, they know the Snowdrop engine, and they're very, very close to the Massive Entertainment group. So they're also doing development for Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora and Star Wars. Chengdu, they do a lot of stuff for China. They also did some stuff for Immortals Phoenix Rising a couple of years ago. Da Nang do free-to-play titles for PC or HTML-enabled platforms, which includes Kindles, and they're currently working on bringing some of this stuff to aeroplanes. So if you want like a Ubisoft-themed version of Bomberman, you want a top-down 2D version of Trackmania, you want Assassin's Creed Solitaire, this is the group to go to. It's just Nano, Ubisoft Nano. They're all there. They're all free to play. Dusseldorf, they did a bunch of stuff for the Settlers. That was supposed to be released last year, the new Settlers game. It got delayed basically an entire year. It's coming out now in February. So they're working on that. They also did the Prince of Persia, The Daggers of Time game that nobody knows about because it's a VR room experience. So this isn't VR where you strap on your PlayStation headset or your Oculus headset. This is a go to a warehouse where there's, 14 people with backpacks with computers in them doing VR games. So that's what that was. They're also helping out Massive Entertainment with Avatar and Star Wars. Halifax, they're working on Assassin's Creed for mobile. Ubisoft Ivory Tower, they're doing the Crew series. They're still pumping through content for that. Season 7, Episode 2 launched back on Wednesday. So that's all now, frozen over stuff. The Kyiv studio, they're in the Ukraine, still helping out the company do things. Obviously, that is secondary to their health and safety with their invasion. So they're still working on all that there while dealing with all that. Leamington is the support studio for Reflections. We'll get to that in a moment. Mainz is where the Anno series is located. They're also the folks doing the console port of Anno 1800. Milan, Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle was their big day, with their big, break as a studio. They followed it up with last year's Sparks of Hope. They got support from Paris, Chengdu, and Pune for that title. Apparently they're a bit burnt out, but they've got DLC coming for it. Montpellier is where the Rayman games generally get developed. This is also the lead studio on Beyond Good and Evil 2. That game is still technically in development according to Ubisoft, but it's been a number of years since we've seen it, so we'll have to wait and see. Montreal is the mecca for Ubisoft development. The studio has a couple of thousand staff on site. This is where Assassin's Creed was born. This is where Far Cry was taken over by Ubisoft because it wasn't an original Ubisoft series. For Honor was there. Rainbow Six Siege was there. It's a bunch of titles come out of the Montreal studio. Last year they finally released Roller Champions, which hasn't really taken hold, and people aren't really doing much with it. There's also the Rainbow Six Extraction game. That was these guys that released early last year, having been delayed out of 2020. It's 2021. Sorry. That game also didn't find its audience. It was basically a stripped down version of the Siege experience, but with randomly placed enemies and all that sort of stuff. It just didn't grab the audience, I think, the way they wanted it to. We know they're working on the Sands of Time remake, having been past development duties back last year after Pune and Mumbai fumbled it completely. The Assassin's Creed stuff, they're not known to be working on anything at the moment. They were the lead studio on Valhalla. Now that game's wrapping up all its content, and Toronto and Bordeaux are doing the bulk of the new Assassin's Creed stuff. Who knows what'll happen there. Mumbai, they did Monopoly Madness a couple of years ago. They also helped on Mario plus Rabbids last year. They're also helping out with the Sands of Time remake, but again they fumbled that, so they're back to doing QA work. Nadeo is where Trackmania is. They're still doing Trackmania. Nothing's changed there. Odessa, it's a support studio. We won't see anything from them. Osaka, they work in conjunction with San Francisco, working on Rocksmith and the X-Defiant mobile game. The trailer here says it's Tom Clancy's X-Defiant. That's not the case anymore. It's just now X-Defiant. They've booted the Tom Clancy brand off it, probably because, they keep milking the Tom Clancy brand for everything they can, and people are starting to really hate it. Paris is where Ghost Recon games were being made for the last couple of years. I say the last few years, it's been a while now. Paris has been leading the charge there. Ghost Recon Breakpoint bombed. People did not like that one at all, especially after the fantastic Wildlands. But they also released Just Dance 2023 last year, so this is the studio where those games are made. Unfortunately, Just Dance 2023 flopped big for Ubisoft, and there's probably two reasons for that. The first is that the game didn't release on all the platforms, so it was only PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and Switch. So there was no PS4 version, there was no Xbox One version. And the second reason it probably failed is because it was a download-only game. If you went into a store and bought, picked up the case from your EB Games or your JB Hi-Fi and took it to the counter and said, hey, I'd like to buy Just Dance 2023 on my PS5 or my Switch, they gave you a code in the box. That's what you got. And I think that turned a lot of people off from buying it, because the big thing with those games is you pop the disc in the console or the cartridge in your Switch, and you can just start dancing, not having to download, a 5, 10, 15 gigabyte game. So I think that sort of really hurt them. Paris Mobile, they do a lot of mobile games. Philippines is a support studio. They support Singapore mainly, so Skull and Bones. I don't think they'll ever revisit Zombie U. The game really only worked on the Wii U, and the Xbox One, PS4 ports of that game were bad. Technically they were fine, but they just didn't play right. Poon, as I said, they were doing the Prince of Persia: Sands of Time remake. They fumbled the ball on that one, so who knows what they're going to be working on next. Quebec is doing the lead on Assassin's Creed Codename Red, which is one of the new... it's the Assassin's Creed game set in Japan. We don't know much about it apart from that. They're also overseeing the development of Assassin's Creed Infinity and Assassin's Creed codename Jade and Hexi. Jade is the mobile game set in China. Hexi is the complete unknown. So we know that they're overseeing all that stuff. The studio also tweeted out a Happy New Year message featuring Phoenix from the Immortal series, which I said earlier, it's been 3 years since that released, so who knows what's going on there. Ubisoft Red Links is the folks that do the Trials series, so it's been a while since they released a main game themselves. As is the case though with a bunch of these studios, they're just doing support for the Tom Clancy titles, so Rainbow Six Siege in this case. They're also one of the ones doing an unannounced AAA game, so it may have been cancelled, we have to wait and see. Reflections, they have nothing publicly announced about what they're working on. It's been a few years since they've made a game. They've just been listed as a support studio on the Ubisoft website, so that's unlikely to change anytime soon. Sagnaway is a support studio. San Francisco, they're doing Rock Band. They're doing Rocksmith Plus, and then they're also doing the X-Defiant game. Shanghai basically is the porting studio to bring games into China. They did a China version of Just Dance a couple of years ago, but they're also assisting with Avatar and Star Wars. Singapore, well, they're apparently working on Skull and Bones, but until that game releases, we'll just have to, take their word for it. Sophia, they're the folks that brought the Ezio trilogy to Switch last year. We don't know what they're working on now that that's been done. Hopefully more Assassin's Creed games on Switch, because I love playing them on the go. Ubisoft Stockholm is an interesting group. So these guys were spun up back in 2018, 2018, by Patrick Bach, who was the lead on the Battlefield series for a number of years. They're apparently working on a AAA game. Who knows if that's been cancelled or not. What we know for this group, though, this is why Stockholm is very, 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 very important that it doesn't close down, is they're working on a project called Scalar. Now, basically, Scalar takes game engine technology, so functions that a game engine does, and puts them in the cloud. So let's say for Skull and Bones, the wave tech, the way that Scalar works is that stuff could be done in-engine on the console. But for a multiplayer game, your waves need to match up with the waves of your mate, right? If you're playing together or playing opposite each other. So Scalar would be the technology that brings that together. So that's sort of what Scalar is. That's a very simplified explanation. Games industry has a great breakdown on the tech and tidbits from Patrick himself. So I highly suggest reading that. The link for that is in the story for Ubisoft. But if that works, that would basically be, bringing cloud gaming and console gaming together into one sort of unified platform. So it's not pure cloud gaming, it's not pure console gaming, it's sort of a mix of the two. Again, it's probably not going to be anytime soon that we see that, public, but if it works, it would be a massive game changer for the games industry. Toronto is the studio where Far Cry 6 was made. Since then, they have been working on the Splinter Cell remake. We got a bunch of concept art released for it last year. They're still hiring for that game, but they're also hiring for a project they're calling Far Cry Project. So we don't know if that's a new Far Cry, an old Far Cry being remastered. We just don't know. It's just called Far Cry Project. Now, these ones I'll skip through. Blue Mammoth, they're doing Brawlhalla. They'll keep doing Brawlhalla. Massive Entertainment. There was a big expectation that Avatar Frontiers of Pandora would release last year. That was not the case, purely because they delayed it to say they needed more time. Given that the two Avatar movies have made in excess of $4.8 billion, Ubisoft will likely want to get this game out while the new movie is still fresh, in order to give people, a reason to dive into this game, sample more of that Avatar money. This is actually the second Avatar game Ubisoft have made. They made one in conjunction with the first movie, so that's there. Massive are also working on the Star Wars game. The only thing we know about Star Wars is it will be open world. Given that these are the folks that made The Division and The Division 2, an open world Star Wars game doesn't seem that surprising from them. Red Storm Entertainment, they're the people doing the Division Heartland title, which is the free-to-play Division game for consoles. They're also helping out with the Division Resurgence, which is the mobile game. They're also they used to be the gatekeepers of the Tom Clancy brand. Ubisoft, unfortunately, because this is where the Tom Clancy games started. So Rainbow Six 2, Ghost Recon, these started here. These guys also oversaw the development of Splinter Cell, Hawks, End War, all those things. Unfortunately, Ubisoft treat them as a bit of a joke studio now, so they tend not to get all that special, all that stuff, all that important stuff at the moment. The final one that we can look through is actually pretty cool and short, and that's WB Games or Warner Brothers Games, depending on how you want to call it. So they've technically got three names. People call them Warner Brothers Games. I call them WB Games because that's technically what they publish things under. And then the final group is Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment. So this group is actually quite small compared to the last two. Avalanche Software, they've got Hogwarts Legacy coming out for PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC next month. Then in April for PS4 and Xbox One, and then Switch in July. They're going to be all in on that like they have been for the past 5 years. Don't expect much else. Monolith, they're still hiring for their Wonder Woman game. They've been hiring for a year since they announced it back in the end of 2021. Because of that, that's all they're going to focus on, so we'll have to wait and see what that ends up being. We do know that it will use a version of the... I've forgotten the name of it. The system that they used for... oh god, what was it called? For the Shadow of War series, the Mordor, Middle Earth, Shadow of War, and that Nemesis system. That's the one. So the Nemesis system was that if you took down an enemy in Shadow of Mordor, they would if you didn't kill them, they would get stronger and then chase you back down and hurt you and all that sort of stuff. So if you didn't finish off enemies, they could come back in the future and cause you problems. So we know Wonder Woman will use a version of that system. We don't know the extent of it though at this point. NetherRealm, they announced a new Mortal Kombat game at the end of last year. That is called Mortal Kombat Onslaught. The downside is that it is a mobile game and it's not a fighting game. It is set between the events of Mortal Kombat 10 and Mortal Kombat 11, and it is a MOBA-inspired title with collectible elements inside. So it is essentially all the keywords you would hear from a marketing executive who thinks these will make a game sell more, except it's a free-to-play game. So that's sort of irrelevant. We don't know anything beyond that. Unfortunately, the description isn't that specific, and there's been no footage or anything released for it for now. Last year, they did celebrate 30 years of Mortal Kombat. So obviously, NetherRealm Studios have only been taking care of it since like 2011. But they were Midway Chicago before then, and Midway Chicago were where the game started up. So people are hoping we'll see Mortal Kombat 12 announced this year. This year will be 4 years since 11 released, so we're hoping people are looking forward to that. In 2023, specifically in May, on the 26th, we'll see the release of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which is the 4-player co-op adventure set in the Arkham universe by Rocksteady, who created the Arkham series. The big thing with this is the other day there was a leak about season pass content for it, which was not something that hadn't been mentioned up until that point. We don't know if that's true because again it is a leak, so there's no confirmation on it. The sad news too for this one, good news and sad news, is that Kevin Conroy, who passed away last year, he recorded all his dialogue already for Batman for the game. So this will be his last Batman performance. Then after leaving all that, we jump into the TT Games group. So TT Games, Traveler's Tales, they did Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga last year. They do a bunch of other sort of Lego things. Up until 2019, when they did Lego DC Villains, they had released a Lego game every year since 2005. Sometimes they had more than one Lego game, but there was generally one a year. And then after 2019's release, they had a couple of years off before Star Wars Skywalker Saga released in 2022. Given that had a big sort of Game of the Year edition at the end of last year, we might see some more DLC from them this year for it, but beyond that we don't know. We do know that the whole new engine they built Skywalker Saga on has been removed entirely. They're not making anything on that now. They've moved to Unreal Engine 5. They spent years developing a new internal engine, basically said this is what we're going to use going forward because we've built it for this purpose, and it didn't work for the developers. It took forever to use, it was clunky, it had performance issues, and while the game itself shipped eventually in a good state, the reports were that crunch was just brutal back then. So they the people at the studio said, if you're going to make games going forward, get rid of this engine because we can't use it. So going forward, Unreal Engine 5 will be will be the engine of choice. The last groups are all WB Games branded, and this is why I'm saying before, some people say Warner Brothers Games, but they say WB Games. So this is not Warner Brothers Games Montreal, it is literally WB Games Montreal. So Montreal, they shipped Gotham Knights last year. They shipped a bunch of free updates since then. There's supposed to be more coming for the game, but we don't know, especially as the game didn't really take off the way that I think they were hoping it would. Boston, they do a bunch of mobile games. They're currently working on Game of Thrones Conquest. They did a whole bunch of updates for that game in 2022, so that's not likely to change. The New York studio is a support studio. San Diego was started up in 2019, and they're still apparently not ready to reveal what they're working on. However, they have said this new game will be a cross-platform, next-generation, free-to-play game, which is another one of those ones where they've thrown every type of marketing term at a genre, at a game to say this is the genre. I don't know what they mean by it. Unfortunately, the design, the step up for them was for mobile games, so we'll have to wait and see. San Francisco studio, they oversaw the Harry Potter Wizards Unite game from Niantic, but other than that, we don't know what they're working on because that was cancelled in 2022. That brings us to the end of all those. So there will be a link in the show notes for all of the deep dives that we went through. Obviously, we didn't go through all of them in super detail because, I still spent 45 minutes on those 5, and there's still another 8 that I've done previously. Moving on to the games coming out next week. Obviously, today was a big day because we got, the Persona games yesterday. We got Fire Emblem today, and Monster Hunter Rise came to PlayStation and Xbox. Technically came to PC through Game Pass, but it's already on PC, has been for a while via Steam. So if you don't have Monster Hunter yet, Monster Hunter Rise, and you do have Game Pass, either on PC or Xbox, it is definitely worth checking out because it is a fantastic game. Next week, however, there's going to be two massive titles. On the 24th of January, we'll finally see the release of Forspoken, assuming it doesn't get delayed yet again. That is coming to PlayStation 5 and PC. Much like all the Square Enix games at the moment, its PS5 is the only console announced. It may go elsewhere, but there's nothing for it yet. On the 26th, we will also see the release of the Wonder Boy Anniversary Collection for Switch, PS4 and PS5. This will be all 4 original Wonder Boy games, so not the remakes of recent years, but it'll be the PAL version, the NTSC version, the Japanese version of all the games, right? So every iteration of those games that released over the years will be included in this collection. So while it's 4 titles, it could be, I think it's something like 16 or 17 variants across them all. On the 27th, we will also, so next Friday, we will see the release of Dead Space, the remake by Motive Studios. Now, given that a lot of people were hoping that the Callisto Protocol last year would be the game, would be the fresh, updated take on Dead Space, and it was not in any way, shape, or form. A lot more pressure has been placed on the Dead Space remake. Obviously, the big thing with this one, apart from it looking fancier because it's got new graphics, is that Isaac will speak in this game, and the actor who voiced Isaac in 2 and 3 has been brought back in to voice him again in this one. So this will give Isaac a voice in the first game for the first time. And with that, we are done. That is another episode in the books for us. Yeah, as I said, it was a sort of a weird week. We got a bunch of game announcements for new platforms. We got a bunch of information on games and content-wise. We got a bunch of release dates for games and a bunch of hardware. So it's sort of a little bit of everything across the board here. We will be back on Tuesday for more of our Splinter Cell series. We are in the final stretch of the first game, mostly because I kept getting stuck at one very annoying part in the most recent playthrough. So yeah, we're in there. We're going to try and smash through that this Tuesday. We'll be back on Friday next week for more episodes of the Maxi-Geek Show. But with that said, until we see you online next time, happy gaming.